As someone who sees the potential in Mexico's economy, it's intriguing to explore why the expected prosperity hasn't quite materialized, despite the nation's advantageous position. But the exploration can't be possible without delving into the dynamics that make Mexico unique and why it might not become the next China. Firstly, Mexico has its fair share of advantages. With a substantial and skilled population, a direct land border with the world's largest economy, and easy access to global trade through its oceans, it seems like the perfect recipe for economic success. The trade tensions between the USA and China appear to open a window of opportunity for Mexico, positioning itself as a low-cost manufacturing hub. Then came the global pandemic, highlighting the vulnerabilities of complex supply chains and offering Mexico another chance to shine as a one-stop shop for manufactured goods. However, despite these favorable conditions, Mexico's growth hasn't matched the industrial opportunities presented. Comparing China and Mexico reveals some key differences. Despite the challenges China faces, including trade tensions, extended lockdowns, intellectual property concerns, higher wage demands, and a less business-friendly government, it remains a manufacturing powerhouse. In 2021 alone, China's industrial output grew by over 20% to a staggering $4.85 trillion, making it nearly twice as productive as the USA and 20 times more productive than Mexico. China's dominance in manufacturing, despite setbacks, is unparalleled. Even with the most conservative estimates, no country comes close to replacing China as an industrial center. The scale of China's output is mind-boggling, adding roughly 5% of total global output to resources in its factories every year. In contrast, Mexico produces $230 billion worth of manufactured goods annually. To put things in perspective, even if Mexico exclusively exported goods to the USA, it wouldn't be enough to replace half of the imports coming from China, valued at $580 billion. The US-China trade war, the rising cost of Chinese labor, and the logistical simplicity of border trade have closed the gap but not eliminated it entirely. It's crucial to acknowledge biases when examining these issues. People often find evidence that supports their desired outcomes, overlooking contrary evidence. Despite the understandable animosity toward the Chinese government and its economic influence, the reality remains unchanged. In the context of this macroeconomic discussion, social and political issues between China and Mexico might distract from the fact that Mexico is not perfect either. While Mexico possesses significant advantages, it's essential to recognize the complexities of global economic dynamics. China's long-standing dominance in manufacturing is a formidable challenge. Mexico's growth is impacted by various factors, including its size compared to the economic giants and the intricate web of global trade. Navigating these challenges requires a nuanced understanding of the economic landscape and a realistic assessment of Mexico's strengths and limitations. So, Mexico has a lot going for it, right? Natural resources, a bunch of young and hardworking folks, and it's conveniently located on the map. But, and there's always a but, there are some issues holding it back from becoming the next big thing, like China. First off, there's this big problem with crime. When we think of Mexico, unfortunately, crime is one of the first things that pops into our heads. And let's be real, our international reputation matters a lot these days. Mexico's got this association with cartels and shady stuff that's casting a shadow on its image. That's not great, especially if you're trying to attract foreign investments and be a major player in the global market. Then there's the whole opportunity thing. Even though Mexico is the 15th largest economy globally, there's this struggle with spreading the wealth around. It's like the money is all hanging out at the cool kids table, leaving the rest of the population kinda left out. Wealth inequality is a concern, especially in the areas beyond the fancy cities. So while Mexico could be the next big thing for low-cost manufacturing, this whole wealth gap is making it tricky for everyone to get a fair slice of the economic pie. And let's talk about being underbanked. A lot of folks in Mexico don't have access to the usual banking stuff, like accounts, online banking, and credit cards. This creates all sorts of problems, like limited financial stability and a tough time doing business. Having a well-organized financial system is like having a superpower, and Mexico's missing out on that. Now here's a real bummer. Brain drain. Lots of smart and educated people are packing their bags and leaving Mexico for better opportunities elsewhere. Sure, sending money back home is nice, but losing skilled workers permanently? Not so cool. It's like Mexico's biggest export is its own people, and that's not a great way to build a thriving economy. But there's a twist in the story. Some big-shot companies like GM, Ford, Toyota, and Tesla are setting up shop in Mexico. They see potential in the workforce and are making serious investments. Now, this foreign investment comes in two flavors: direct and portfolio. Direct investment means these companies have a lot of say in what goes on, but it also means they're here to benefit their home countries more than Mexico. It's like they're setting up shop in Mexico to get a good deal on manufacturing, not necessarily to boost the local economy. On the other hand, portfolio investment is more like a win-win for Mexico. It involves investing in financial stuff without controlling everything. It's like buying shares in a Mexican startup. If that startup strikes gold, the money goes to the investors, but the technology stays in Mexico. Sounds good, right? But for some reason, it's not as popular as it should be in Mexico. Now, I'm no expert, but I've been checking out some info, and it seems like Mexico has its own unique set of challenges and strengths. First things first, as I mentioned earlier, Mexico has been getting a lot of foreign direct investment, especially from big companies like Tesla. This is cool because it means more jobs and training for locals. When Tesla builds a factory there, it's not just about constructing the thing. It's also about hiring tons of Mexican workers to run it. Plus, these big investments help change the way people see Mexico. It's not just about crime and cheap labor anymore. Now it's becoming known for quality manufactured goods. But, and there's always a but, there's this thing about debt in Mexico. Sure, having a low household debt sounds good, but it's mainly because a lot of people don't have access to banks. This makes it tough to give out loans to folks who earn cash and don't have formal financial records. So even though low debt might seem positive, it holds Mexico back when compared to other countries like China or India, which can rely on debt to grow their industries. Now let's talk about Mexico's BFF, the United States. It's great that the U.S. is Mexico's primary export partner, but it's also a bit worrisome. More than 80% of Mexico's exports go to the U.S., while Canada, for example, only makes up about 3%. It's like Mexico needs the U.S., but the U.S. doesn't need Mexico as much. This relationship has been working fine, but it could turn into a bit of a headache if the U.S. changes its mind about trade deals. Just look at the whole NAFTA to USMCA switcheroo. Speaking of trade deals, China can handle a trade war with the U.S., but Mexico, not so much. The uncertainty around future trade deals has made companies a bit hesitant to invest in Mexico. This is also why Mexico struggles to attract portfolio investment, the kind that lets you keep control of your assets in the country. But it's not all doom and gloom. Mexico is making moves to tackle these challenges. There's a push for more technology, like digital banking and mobile payments, to reach the underbanked population. Efforts to combat crime and corruption are happening too, though it's a slow process. The government is also working on economic reforms, building infrastructure and diversifying industries beyond just manufacturing. Sure, there are hurdles like crime, wealth inequality, and brain drain, but Mexico isn't sitting still. It's on a journey to overcome these challenges and create a more prosperous and equitable future. The recent trends show hope, and who knows, maybe one day Mexico won't be as dependent on the U.S. It might not become the next China overnight, but it's heading in a direction that could make it a strong player on the global economic stage. Let's cheer Mexico on for taking those steps towards a more independent and thriving future.